What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here. So it's been a while since I've talked about any shows at all. So I'm back, and it is starting off with something a little bit different because for a while I have wanted to start talking about the Star Wars shows. I haven't watched any of them, and I feel like that's a bit of a disservice to myself because while I'm not a diehard Star Wars fan, I definitely do enjoy Star Wars. I've seen all of the movies. I've seen some of the shows. I've played most of the games. So I did want to get into some of these shows and also review them as well because I've heard really good things about The Mandalorian, decent things about like the Boba Fett, Obi-Wan, pretty good things about Andor. So I'm excited to get into these shows and watch them and review them. I just wanted to get through some of these other shows that I was reviewing previously first. But clearly that's a gigantic task that it's going to take a while for me to get through. So I decided, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead, rip the band-aid off and just dig right into these Star Wars shows. And basically where I left off in my own personal viewing, I finally got through all of the Clone Wars. And it really was a show that I'd heard a lot of good stuff about, but in my mind I'm thinking, it's just for kids though, it's probably not that. But it was really good. It was really well done. Some parts of it were definitely more for kids than for adults, but it definitely was a good in between from episode 2 to episode 3, and it fleshed out a lot of characters that needed fleshing out in those movies because they didn't do it enough. So I really enjoyed that. So I was excited to get into the Rebels show because I knew that was the next thing that I needed to watch before I got into like the Mandalorian and all of that. So I decided I was just going to sit down and watch season 1, but I didn't necessarily want to do an episode by episode review because these are shorter episodes. I feel like the reviews would have gone by just way too quick. There wouldn't have been much to talk about. So I figured I'd be doing these season by season instead. And I might even break it up into half seasons after this one since I know this season's a little bit shorter than the next 3. And I may not go all the way through this before I jump over to another show. I'm still deciding on all of that. But with all that being said, though, I am excited to talk about this first season because, in my opinion, it's a very good start to this show. And it does get my interest peaked for what's going to come next. The first thing that I want to talk about is just the setup for the show and what this show is about. I just recently watched Firefly for the first time, and it feels like the writers for this show took a lot of inspiration for that. I mean, you think about it's a small team of kind of outlaws, not rebels, but thieves, smugglers. Like they're not exactly the best people, but they're fighting against a bigger group, and they just want to help people, kind of like in Firefly. Their ship also has a small ship that detaches from it and becomes like a little small craft, just like the Serenity has. They don't have any companions, though. That would make this not a kid's show, so they didn't talk about any of that. Although, to be fair, you could make the comparison. The one episode where Hera was traded by Lando to the one guy. You could say there was a little bit of comparison there, but no, it does feel though like there was definite inspiration from Firefly. The one episode where they're going to get the message out to everybody. I mean, as they're talking about it and as they're talking about going to do it, all I'm thinking is, this feels like the plot of the movie Serenity. So it was a lot of fun looking at it from the story of Firefly does fit very well in the Star Wars universe because of that idea of a small group on the outer rims, further away from the control of the Empire, trying to basically do as much as they can to the Empire, all the way out here as they can, while also trying to just help people that are under the Empire's thumb. So on that note, it was really fun to see it through that lens and sort of see the comparisons and see how well they utilized a lot of those storylines and kind of tropes from Firefly. But yeah, let's talk about the team to kick it off, though, because it is a fun team to be a part of. You have sort of the typical team tropes that you're expecting to see in a show like this. You've got your newbie to the group who also is the young whippersnapper, the one that's all about, oh yeah, I'm just going to do everything I can. I'm a spunky youth. I'm a rebel. I'm going to do my best. And yeah, Ezra fits a lot of those check boxes. But in my opinion, the one thing that he's got going for him is you do feel like he's not just your typical kid. They do write him with a lot of depth. They give him a little bit more to work off of. Obviously, the story with his parents is not unheard of, but it gives him a little bit more of an edge. It's something that, yes, of course, he's going to wrestle with the dark side a little bit because of that, because of the Inquisitor trying to get to him and really mess with him. So I do appreciate the fact that he wasn't just your typical kid on the team that's always the kid and always, very immature and undisciplined. I was like, what was the word that Kanan used for him? Undisciplined. He does at times find that discipline and find the moments where, okay, I do need to stop being so immature and realize the gravity of this situation. So, but he was. I feel like they introduced him to the team very well. They did do some of the typical tropes whenever you're bringing a team together for the first time where there's a little bit of mistrust or they don't always get along, so you have to have that episode that sort of brings some of them together. But I do like that dynamic, though, and when it's done well, it's enjoyable to watch. And I think the dynamic now, as the season progressed, between him and... Dang it, what was his name? Keb? I'm almost good on all the names because if you watch any of my reviews, you know that I'm not good with names. But I think Keb is the big guy. The relationship between those two, like an older brother and younger brother, and then also throwing Chop into the mix as well as the little sassy robot that loves to pull pranks on both of them. It was a fun dynamic, and sometimes it did get a little too, okay, guys, seriously, you're gonna do this now? While you're in the middle of a battle, you're going to wreck things. Like, come on. You can't stop for right this moment and realize this is very serious and maybe you should look into it more. But it still was fun. And again, I feel like they did the trope, but they did it well, and they brought the team together very well by the end of the season. As far as Kanan as the kind of captain leader of the ship, in my opinion, it's really weird for me because I'm so used to seeing Freddie Prinze Jr. as just kind of the goofball. I look at him as Fred in Scooby-Doo movies or that one episode of Psych where he was like the big jock, but he was secretly a nerd. I don't know. I just always see him as more comedic. He was really good in this. Like, the voice acting from him, he sounds like a true Jedi by the end of this season. I don't know how to describe it other than he sounds composed, he sounds serious, he sounds like a Jedi. I was really shocked because, of course, I wanted to look up all the voice actors just to see, and some of them I recognized, but he was the one where I'm like, really? Really? He's in this show? But hearing him, you wouldn't know. Like, unless you knew his voice and you listened to him several times, you wouldn't necessarily know right off the bat that that's Freddie Prinze Jr. But the character of Kanan, though, in my opinion, again, kind of the flawed captain, the one with a bit of a secret past that he's hiding from his crew. He doesn't want them to know because he's ashamed of it. He's also a Jedi, so there's that as well. The Jedi that, they don't want to tell their Padawans their truth, even though that's kind of what they're trying to get their Padawans to do. So there is a little bit of that hypocrisy of the Jedi in this show as well, and I do like that because it's something that I do feel like since I think since like the prequels, they've really started to show a bit more. Is that the Jedi Order was not all right. Clearly they were the good guys because they were fighting for the people and the Empire and the Emperor and all of that. They wanted to take control of the people, but the Jedi Order did have its flaws, and they've shown that more and more as we've gotten more details about it. So this was another example of he's trying to teach his Padawan, hey, you need to let go of this fear, you need to be truthful with yourself, and he's hiding some of this stuff from his team and from his Padawan. So it's a little bit hypocritical, and I feel like that sort of, it does show there's still a bit of that Jedi Order in him. And I wonder if we'll dig into that maybe in the next season. But I thought his connection with the team, he and Hera, I thought had a good... It wasn't like a true romantic thing, but it felt genuine at times, like there was that connection. And then the relationship between him and Ezra, as master and apprentice, I feel like they did a good job of, again, showing that hypocrisy there, but also showing again how teaching can also be a learning experience. And that's, I do feel like that's something that we've seen multiple times more recently in the Star Wars saga. With like Luke training Rey, he did learn a little bit more about himself in that. So, Hera as the pilot, I mean, yeah, she's awesome. Basically, the mom of the group, the one that kind of gets everybody to stop roughhousing and sort of takes control whenever Kanan's not around, and sometimes takes control when he is because, he sometimes is not always thinking the brightest. So, but she has that good mother dynamic and has a lot of good moments as well. Sometimes she can be sort of that one character that the best way I can think to describe it is everybody wants to go do this thing that they're going to do, but you have to have the one character that's saying, no, that's not a good idea. She tended to be that character more often than not. So I hope that changes a little bit because I don't want her to always be the one that's wrong. Because that's what it sort of feels like with those characters is, hey, don't go do that. Because on the surface, yeah, it sounds like a bad idea, but because we know this is a show, we know this is fiction, we know it's probably all going to work out, we're sitting there going, no, go let them do it because it's probably going to work out. So either have some moments where it doesn't work out or have some moments where she's not that voice of reason. Let her be the one that's going, no, you know what, you're right, let's go do this. But overall, still really enjoyed her character. Sabine, fun character. She's a little quirky, a little not off, but just some of the stuff that she does, like the art, the murals and stuff. But also has some fun quippy lines as well. So, and then Keb, I think is his name. He's just the big brutish guy that he also has his fun quippy lines, but he's clearly not the brightest in light bulb in the drawer or whatever. I don't know. My brain is kind of fried, so I'm not thinking very clearly right now. But yeah, I like both of them. They're not really integral in my opinion, but they're still fun to have on the team. They do add that bit of levity at times, but they also show how useful they are in a fight, in the planning stage and also in executing the plans as well. So, and then finally Chop, he's just kind of the wild card. And it's fun because we've seen, R2D2 obviously was that sassy droid that, oh yeah, you're going to give me, sass, well, I'm going to give it right back to you. Like, he had those moments in not just the originals, but in the prequels as well. Chop just takes it to a whole new level. Like, it's just so much fun to have a droid that is not just sassy, almost psychotic sometimes. The way he likes to mess with people is very, like, he literally knocks Ezra off the ship in the one training scene that he had. And then they manage to get him back. Kanan pulls him back with the Force, and then Keb grabs him. And then literally Chop comes up, laughs about it, and then throws another thing at him. I'm just like, he nearly died. And you're laughing? So, yeah, I don't know. It's something fun about having that type of droid on the ship. And again, the back and forth between Chop, even though he's not speaking, there's still something fun. Like, you really get a sense of what he's trying to say. They do a good job with whoever's doing the sounds and the voice. There's clearly, you can hear what they're trying to say through the beeps. So they do a good job of mixing the sound for that, but then also just the animation on him. It really provides a lot of personality for a droid, that looks just like a little box, basically. So yeah, the team dynamic overall is really fun. It's not something we haven't seen before, but I feel like it really works. And when it works, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So yeah, a lot of fun in this first season, seeing them going on some of these different missions and stuff. As far as the overall story, there were some episodes that did drag a little bit. Honestly, weirdly enough, the two episodes that dragged for me the most were the ones with other Star Wars characters making appearances, so Lando or C-3PO and R2-D2. It kind of felt like those episodes were see, they said the thing. Like, it did feel a little like that, the references and stuff. So I don't know. It felt like they were more so, hey, let's put these Star Wars characters, guys. Isn't this cool? And while it was a little difficult at first trying to get to know all of these new characters, when you try to throw in characters like that we already know from other Star Wars properties, it does sort of feel like it's hand holding it a bit. Like, oh guys, see, we're part of the same universe. When you don't really need that, you've already got, the stormtroopers are all around. You've got the Empire being referenced. You've got all of these things that make it a part of the Star Wars universe. You don't also have to go and get these crutches, these little Easter eggs to make it feel like, no, guys, see, it's definitely a part of the same universe. We've got these characters. That's what it felt like to me. And the stories surrounding them were not particularly interesting, in my opinion. So those were the ones that dragged a little bit. Also, the one episode with Ezra and Keb. I really hope that's his name, because if not, I'm really just I'm just saying his name wrong this entire review, and that's fine, I guess. But the one where they have to go and kind of work out their differences, go into the market, that one, it was fun. It was fine. It was just an episode that I've seen before, where it's like two characters on a team are having a disagreement. Well, we'll send them off on their own, and by the end of the episode, they'll get along fine. It felt very much like that. So, but it was still a fine episode. Outside of that, though, I did like how much recurring stuff we had throughout this season. I kind of expected it to be a little bit just kind of individual episodes, and what happens here doesn't get referenced again. But there was a lot of stuff that kept coming back, like the one animal that attacks Ezra whenever he's trying to, make connections with the animals. It comes back later. He actually makes the connection to have it attack a droid. The one time that Hera and Sabine got trapped on a planet and all those monsters were attacking them, they go and they use those monsters against the Inquisitor and the stormtroopers that are tracking them. Whenever they first capture Ezra, they ask him who he is, and he says Jabba the Hutt. And so later on, whenever Callus, I think it was Callus that was talking to him, but he's like, he's naming all of the people, and he says Jabba the apprentice. I'm like, that's a nice little callback. So they did a really good job of writing things that kept popping up. Callus kept popping up. The one minister lady, she kept popping up throughout the season. And obviously the Inquisitor was kind of the main bad guy for this season. And so it was fun to see that, and it felt like it was a good cohesive story because of that. It didn't just feel like separate stories that were happening and just none of them referenced each other and just, oh yeah, you remember that one thing? We don't either. So I like it whenever shows can do that, whenever they are a bit more episodic, but they still are able to take what was done before and still reference them and still use them in a way that makes hey, the writers were actually using our brains. We're not just forgetting what we just wrote here. Because there are some shows that I've reviewed that feel like it does that. So, but the Inquisitor, I will go ahead and talk about him as well. Good villain. And obviously I've seen other Inquisitors and stuff in some of the games and all of that. So it's fun to see an Inquisitor. I think this is the first one I've seen. I think this might be the first one that I've seen, like in a show or a movie, but I'm pretty sure there were some in Fallen Order and Survivor, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to check my facts on that later. But this is the first one I'm pretty sure that I'm seeing on like a show, so it was fun to see him. Also, I mean, Jason Isaacs, fantastic actor, so it's great to have him voicing it. I am sad that he's going to be gone. But, yeah, I mean, he was very entertaining, very chilling delivery, which, I mean, of course, it's Jason Isaacs, so of course he has that. So, yeah, it was very, very good, and I'm excited to see, I guess, now that Darth Vader's stepping in, is he going to become the main threat? I kind of doubt that, because he should be such a big threat that once he steps in, that's kind of like, okay, no, we're screwed. So it's weird that they're already introducing him in season 1. I'm just like, okay, so season 2, how are they going to get away from Darth Vader? I kind of figured they would send like some other, maybe another Inquisitor or somebody who's maybe a bit higher up the totem pole, kind of like what they did with Tarkin, but even higher than that. So I don't know what's going to happen for season 2. I don't know who's going to be the main threat, but yeah, the Inquisitor for the first season was definitely, he was an intimidating threat. Maybe a little too showy. You know, there were some times where it felt like he was more playing with them than he was trying to capture them or kill them. But he still was a good villain to have for the first season. I also do want to throw out a little. I will say I like the storyline of Travis. First of all, Brent Spiner, I looked up, he was the voice actor for him, and that's always fun to have Data involved. But no, it was an interesting storyline because it's not something that's really focused on, is this idea of two warring sides. You know, you've got this one side and you got this other side, and you've got voices on both sides that are kind of like the spearhead, like, yes, I am the voice of this rebellion and we're going to fight back, but it's actually just somebody the Empire is using to try to track down people. And honestly, it's something that could be applied. You know, we have politicians in our government and it's like, oh yes, I'm fighting for this side. Oh, I'm fighting for this side. It's like, are they fighting for our side or are they just fighting for themselves? And they pretend like, oh yes, I'm fighting for you. I will fight really hard. Oh, you're gonna give me money? Oh, okay. Well, I don't have to fight for that. That's fine. You know, like it is something that doesn't get talked about a lot, but it's a fun story idea. It's actually something I'd thought about for a story. You know, where you've got like a rebellion that's trying to rise up and maybe does have somebody as the figurehead, but then at the end you find out that the figurehead was just another pawn of the big thing that they're trying to rise against. So it's just kind of a fun idea, and I did like the fact that they utilized that. You know, they didn't just make him, oh yes, I'm fighting for you guys. Like it would have been very easy to do that. It was a little predictable, in my opinion, just the way they had it all set up and how he was there, and then all of a sudden everybody shows up. He's like, oh no, what are we doing? It did feel a little predictable, but again, I have to remember this was a show that was on the Disney XD channel, so it was a show for kids. So they would be a little bit more surprised than most of us adults are going to be watching this. But it still was, again, it's a good show that, yeah, in war, anything can happen. You can't just trust anybody. So that was fun. Let's see, what else? I guess, I mean, talking about the final couple episodes, you know, it was, again, Tarkin showing up. It did feel like a bit of a tone shift, you know, because I will say there was a lot of episodes where I'm thinking, wow, the Empire in this show is a little forgiving. You know, there are several moments where, like the two drill instructors, whenever Ezra goes to train with the other stormtrooper apprentices or whatever, after all of that happens, you know, I'm thinking, wow, I mean, they just basically let these rebels get in there and just wreck some shit, and nobody's like, hey, come on, like, you know, beating them up or torturing them or anything. And then Tarkin shows up, and within that one episode, like that, just they're both dead because of all of the screw ups that they did. So yeah, it was kind of a fun little tone shift that went from, oh yeah, the Empire, you know, they're just a bunch of goofballs. We just run around and mess with them, and who cares? Then all of a sudden Tarkin shows up. It's like, oh no, they're dead serious. Like you mess up, you're dead. You don't get a chance to rectify your mistake. You're gone. And then the person that just watched you get executed realizes that's going to be them if they make the same mistake. So yeah, it was a fun tone shift, and then it sets up for a really fun ending where, you know, after they set up this whole trap and then they managed to capture Kanan, you know, I really liked how the final episode ends, where we get that moment. They rescue Kanan. He has that battle with the Inquisitor. He finally kind of gives himself over to the Force, you know, for the first time. Because really, even though Ezra was growing as an apprentice or a Padawan, it did feel like it was Kanan growing this season as a Jedi. You know, he started off the season, he showed that he was a Jedi, he had those powers, but it didn't feel like he was a true Jedi Knight. It felt like he was just somebody who had the Force and had a lightsaber. By the end of the season, he truly did feel like a Jedi because he realized the power of the Force. It was a really, really good moment for him. And I love the one episode where Ezra was going through the temple and gets this Kyber crystal for the first time. Because again, it showed Ezra's learning a lot about himself and a lot about himself in the Force. But also, at the same time, we see Kanan learning stuff about himself. So it's a really good setup, and I feel like the show is very much focused not just on Ezra but also Kanan as well. And I feel like anytime you have a team dynamic, if you just have one person that's sort of the main character, it can kind of lose, again, like Keb and Sabine tend to get pushed to the side a little bit more. You know, they have their moments, but for the most part, it felt like it was focused on the main, Ezra and Kanan. But I feel like those two characters are interesting enough to where I'm happy with that. You know, I don't necessarily need all of the other team members getting these emotional character arcs throughout the season. What else? Ahsoka showing up, that's fun. You know, I'm excited to see her in the next season. I don't know how much she'll be involved or even how much Darth Vader will be involved, but of course we know, Ahsoka and Anakin, we'll see how that dynamic plays out if it does. That'll be kind of exciting to see. Having Senator Organa in there, that's kind of a fun little. He was sort of the one that spearheaded a lot of the resistance. So, yeah, seeing him involved, that's going to be fun. Oh, and also just because I talked about the academy that Ezra, slipped into, it was really fun seeing that because a lot of people talked about how the clone troopers became the stormtroopers, but in reality, we know now people were trained. At some point they stopped making the clones. They actually went and got people to become stormtroopers, and they brought these kids in and trained them. I feel like it was really cool seeing some of that because I don't know if this is the first time they talked about that or not. Obviously, in the sequel movies, we saw that the First Order troops were obviously not just clones. But I don't know. There's something fun seeing like, oh yes, see, here they are. They're training kids to become stormtroopers, and that's how they basically stepped away from having to use clones. I think that's about it though. The stormtroopers' aim is still very bad. It was kind of funny in that episode in the academy whenever they're training all the kids and they had the one where they had to shoot the wall, the little targets on the wall to make the platforms move out. All I'm thinking is the ones that are hitting every one of their shots, the guys up at the top are like, yes, his aim is very good. 100%. Wow. He's never going to make it as a stormtrooper. But this guy, he's missed almost all of his shots. Fantastic. Oh, man. I really hope they reference that at least a little bit in this show. I have heard they reference it in The Mandalorian a little bit. But, yeah, I don't know. It's a fun little joke. But, yeah, that's about it, though. Overall, very excited to see where this show goes. Again, I don't know how I'm going to be doing these reviews for this show. I don't want to do episode by episode. But I'm not sure if I'm just going to be doing full season or from here on out half season since they are a bit longer. And also I don't know if I'm going to go just all the way through the series or if I'm going to take a break halfway through and then come back to it later or not. So we'll see what happens. But with that, I'm glad to be back. It's been a while since I've watched anything. I do also have some games that I want to play, so I'm like, I gotta find time to play those as well. So, but yeah, that's about it for me. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on the first season of Star Wars Rebels? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe, future Star Wars Rebels reviews and other Star Wars shows. And I will see you guys at the next one. Peace out.